The Pearl, Chapter 5. The late moon arose before the first rooster crowed. Kino opened his eyes in the darkness, for he sensed movement near him, but he did not move. Only his eyes searched the darkness, and in the pale light of the moon that crept through the holes in the brush house, Kino saw Juana arise silently from beside him. He saw her move toward the fireplace. So carefully did she work that he heard only the lightest sound when she moved the fireplace stone. And then, like a shadow, she glided toward the door. She paused for a moment beside the hanging box where Coyotito lay. Then for a second she was black in the doorway, and then she was gone. Now, this scene is a really interesting piece of parallelism. It very closely mirrors the very first scene of the entire novel. We have Kino waking up very early, and Juana's there awake, and the first thing she does in the very first scene was go to the fireplace, and then she checks on the baby. But this time, she's not going to the fireplace to light the fire. What is she going for at the fireplace? I think she's getting the pearl. So she disappears, she takes off. She's sneaking out. And rage surged in Kino. He rolled up to his feet and followed her as silently as she had gone, and he could hear her quick footsteps going toward the shore. Quietly he tracked her, and his brain was red with anger. What an interesting piece of figurative language. His brain was red with anger. That great symbolism of that color red. She burst clear out of the brush line and stumbled over the little boulders, rocks, toward the water. And then she heard him coming and she broke into a run. Her arm was up to throw when he leaped at her and caught her arm and wrenched the pearl from her. He took it from her violently. He struck her in the face with his clenched fist, his hand in a ball, and she fell among the boulders, and he kicked her in the side. In the pale light, he could see the little waves break over her, and her skirt floated about and clung to her legs as the water receded. Receded means to pull back. So the setting here is, as you guessed, right at the shore. Kino looked down at her and his teeth were bared. Now, if you think about that, his teeth were bared. He's like a wild animal. We have seen him make this expression once before. When was it? Exactly. It was when the scorpion was threatening Coyotito. Think about what that means for the pearl. What meaning has the pearl taken on that he's making the same gesture at Juana, this baring of his teeth? Juana threatening the pearl makes Kino bare his teeth in the same way that Kino bared his teeth at the scorpion threatening his son's life. He hissed at her like a snake, and Juana stared at him with wide, unfrightened eyes. Eyes like a sheep before the butcher. Now, if you think about that, that doesn't seem to make too much sense, right? If you think about what a sheep and a butcher interaction is, the butcher's about to kill the sheep. Why would the sheep be unfrightened? Well, there's maybe two reasons, right? Maybe it's a sheep are dumb. It doesn't know. And sheep are dumb is kind of a big theme in literature. But maybe it also thinks about, it knows what's coming, and so why bother being afraid? Which do you think is what is right for Juana? Is she unknowing? She doesn't think he's going to hurt her? Or is she resigned to her fate? She knew there was murder in him, and it was all right. She had accepted it, and she would not resist or even protest. Wow, she's willing to give up her life for this. And then the rage left him, and a sick disgust took its place. That disgust, that like feeling of being grossed out. Now, what could Kino be disgusted by right now? He turned away from her and walked up the beach and through the brush line. His senses were dulled by his emotion. He heard the rush, got his knife out, and lunged at one dark figure and felt his knife go home. That's a way to say that it entered skin. And then he was swept to his knees and swept again to the ground. Whoa, who's attacking who here? Think about this. So Kino gets out his knife and lunged at one dark figure. So he stabbed somebody. And then he's swept to his knees and swept again to the ground. Greedy fingers went through his clothes. Frantic, rushing fingers searched him, and the pearl, knocked from his hand, lay winking behind a little stone in the pathway. It glinted in the soft moonlight. So, who attacked him? Let's find out. But before we go on, did they get the pearl? I want you to think about what evidence in this sentence here, from greedy all the way to moonlight, so 2 sentences, what evidence shows that they did or did not get the pearl? So Juana dragged herself up from the rocks on the edge of the water. So if you assumed that the attacker was Juana, here she is still at the edge of the water. So that's definitely not the attacker. Her face was a dull pain and her side ached. Now, why is she in pain right now? Think about that. Good. She steadied herself on her knees for a while, and her wet skirt clung to her. It stuck to her. There was no anger in her for Kino. Think about how you would react if your partner had just beaten you and kicked you while you were down. Me, I would not be feeling this way. There was no anger in her for Kino. I would have a lot of anger for Kino. He had said, I am a man, and that meant certain things to Juana. Now, before we go on, I want to caution you. This is a very fascinating way to view life. Would not encourage it. Because here's what he said. He had said, I am a man, and that meant certain things to Juana. It meant that he was half insane and half God. It meant that Kino would drive his strength against a mountain and plunge his strength against the sea. If we think about this line here, he would drive his strength against a mountain. Who's going to win? Yeah, the mountain. And plunge his strength against the sea. Who's going to win there? The sea. So maybe that's the half insane part. Juana, in her woman's soul, knew that the mountain would stand while the man broke himself, that the sea would surge while a man drowned in it. And yet it was this thing that made him a man, half insane and half God. And Juana had need of a man. She could not live without a man. Now, again, not true. You can live without a man. You can be an independent person. Juana, she does not feel that way for herself. Although she might be puzzled or confused by these differences between man and woman, she knew them and accepted them and needed them. Of course she would follow him. There was no question of that. Sometimes the quality of woman, the reason, the caution, the sense of preservation, of saving things, could cut through Kino's manness and save them all. She climbed painfully to her feet, and she dipped her cupped palms in the little waves and washed her bruised face with the stinging salt water, and then she went creeping up the beach after Kino. Wow, y'all. That is an intense scene, and it's not over. A flight of herring clouds had moved over the sky from the south. I don't know what herring clouds are. I'm picturing them as little herring fish, so I'm thinking like small and thin clouds. So they had moved over the sky from the south. The pale moon dipped in and out of the strands of clouds. So we have strands of clouds. Strands are thin, so we're able to use this herring, because that's not a type of cloud. Like, that's not like cumulonimbus herring style, right? That's a piece of figurative language. Right, so we've got herring clouds and we've got strands of clouds. So yeah, they're definitely thin. So the pale moon dipped in and out of the strands of clouds so that Juana walked in darkness for a moment and in light the next. Her back was bent with pain and her head was low. She went through the line of brush when the moon was covered, and when it looked through, she saw the glimmer of the great pearl in the path behind the rock. So here we have confirmation that the thieves, the attackers, did not get the pearl. She sank to her knees and picked it up, and the moon went into the darkness of the clouds again. Juana remained on her knees while she considered whether to go back to the sea and finish her job, and as she considered, the light came again. and she saw 2 dark figures lying in the path ahead of her. Now, who are those figures? Take a moment and think about that. She leaped forward and saw that one was Kino and the other a stranger with dark, shiny fluid leaking from his throat. Now, before we move on, I want you to really consider the symbolism in this paragraph, in this setting. We've got this lightness and darkness, and when we think of the symbolism of light and dark, good and evil, we've got the pearl shining with the reflection of the moon. So the pearl is also becoming light and dark, and Juana is feeling this tear between loyalty to her husband, which could mean she does whatever he thinks and follows him, or sacrifices herself and the pearl. This is a complicated piece, and this paragraph here really brings that home with the setting. So she leaped forward and saw that Kino, and then there's a stranger with some shiny fluid leaking from his throat. It's blood. Okay. Kino moved sluggishly. Think about like a slug, so slowly. Arms and legs stirred or moved like those of a crushed bug, and a thick muttering came from his mouth. So he's like slurring his words. They're not coming out clearly. Now, in an instant, Juana knew that the old life was gone forever. So the old life maybe meaning from before the pearl. A dead man in the path and Kino's knife, dark-bladed, beside him, convinced her. All of the time, Juana had been trying to rescue something of the old piece of the time before the pearl. But now it was gone, and there was no retrieving it. There was no going back and getting it. And knowing this, she abandoned the past instantly, bypassed. There was nothing to do but to save themselves. Wow, Juana is like pro-level moving on. Her pain was gone now, her slowness. Wow, she just went from beaten and bruised to all better. What can you think of times when you've heard of that? Maybe of like a mom whose child is trapped beneath a car and she suddenly gets this surge of adrenaline? Maybe that's what's going on with Juana. So her pain was gone now, her slowness. Quickly, she dragged the dead man from the pathway into the shelter of the brush. I wonder why. Let's see if we get an answer there. She went to Kino and sponged his face with her wet skirt. His senses were coming back and he moaned. "They have taken the pearl. I have lost it. Now it is over," he said. "The pearl is gone." So think about the point of view here. What does Juana know? What does the reader know? With our omniscient narrator, we've got a greater point of view or a wider perspective than Kino has. Kino thinks it's been stolen. Juana quieted him as she would quiet a sick child. "Hush," she said. "Here is your pearl. I found it in the path. Can you hear me now? Here is your pearl. Can you understand? You have killed a man. We must go away. They will come for us. Can you understand? We must be gone before the daylight comes." Wow, she's so calm about this. She's really handling this whole thing just very chill. Juana's a trooper. "I was attacked," Kino said uneasily. "I struck to save my life." I struck, meaning I striked against him, right? "Do you remember yesterday?" Juana asked. "Do you think that will matter? Do you remember the men of the city? Do you think your explanation will help?" Juana is thinking, in their point of view, is Kino now trustworthy? Think about how Juan Tomas reacted after he refused to sell the pearl to the pearl buyers. Ooh, we've got some drama here, some tension. This difference in point of view is really leading up to some suspense here. Kino drew a great breath and fought off his weakness. "No," he said, "you are right." And his will hardened, and he was a man again. Now, remember, a man means that he is half God and half insane. I wonder what mountain he's about to throw himself about. "Go to our house and bring Coyotito," he said, "and bring all the corn we have. I will drag the canoe into the water, and we will go." And now remember, we had talked about how the canoe represents his ability to take care of his family, and also the continuance of the family. And so we've got the canoe coming back. We've got this really important symbol. It's a motif now. It's come back several times. This is important. So he took his knife and left her. She is headed back to the house to get the baby and some food, and Kino is headed to the water to get the canoe prepared. He stumbled toward the beach and he came to his canoe. And when the light broke through again, he saw that a great hole had been knocked in the bottom. Somebody punched a hole in the bottom of his boat, and a searing rage came to him and gave him strength. Whoa, y'all. Kino was in a very dark place. Now the darkness was closing in on his family. Now the evil music filled the night, hung over the mangroves, that's a kind of tree, skirled in the wave beat. It's everywhere. The canoe of his grandfather plastered over and over. So remember, they had carefully taken care of it over generations, putting layer and layer of plaster. The canoe of his grandfather plastered over and over, and a splintered hole broken in it. This was an evil beyond thinking. The killing of a man was not so evil as the killing of a boat. Whoa! This is just a boat, y'all. Why is this so special to him? Well, here's why. For a boat does not have suns, and a boat cannot protect itself, and a wounded boat does not heal. So once the boat's done, that's it. There's no coming back. There's no family legacy at all anymore. There was sorrow or deep sadness in Kino's rage, but this last thing had tightened him beyond breaking. He was an animal now, and also half god and half insane. He's a lot of things. He was an animal now for hiding, for attacking, and he lived only to preserve himself and his family. He was not conscious of or noticing the pain in his head. He leaped up the beach through the brush line toward his bush house, and it did not occur to him to take one of the canoes of his neighbors. Never once did the thought enter his head, any more than he could have conceived breaking a boat. So we have Kino in this very interesting place. He just beat his wife. He just killed a man. And yet still, he's not going to steal a boat from a neighbor. He's not going to destroy a boat. So Kino is pretty complicated. At the beginning, we had this kind of sad figure where he loves his son and he's helpless to help the baby. And then he turned kind of evil in beating Juana and killing this man. But now we have maybe some redemption for him. The roosters were crowing, and the dawn was not far off. Smoke of the first fire seeped or kind of squeezed out through the walls of the brush houses, and the first smell of cooking corn cakes was in the air. It's like breakfast time, right? This is, again, a lot like the beginning of the novel where we have the cooking smells, and we've got already the dawn birds were scampering or kind of wandering around in the bushes. And the weak moon was losing its light, and the clouds thickened and curdled or kind of curled up like milk in hot liquid to the southward. The wind blew freshly into the estuary, which is the name for the little bay, a nervous, restless wind with the smell of storm on its breath, and there was change and uneasiness in the air. Kino, hurrying toward his house, felt a surge of exhilaration. He was very excited. Now, he was not confused, for there was only one thing to do, and Kino's hand went first to the great pearl in his shirt, and then to his knife hanging under his shirt. Kino is, if we were to stop and make a prediction, I would not predict some positive stuff. He saw a little glow ahead of him, and then without interval, without break, a tall flame leaped up in the dark with a crackling roar, and a tall edifice, almost a building of fire, lighted the pathway. What's on fire? You guess. Kino broke into a run. Of course, It was his brush house, he knew, and he knew that these houses could burn down in very few moments. As he ran, a scuttling figure, kind of like shuffling along figure, ran toward him. Juana, with Coyotito. They got out safe, with Coyotito in her arms and Kino's shoulder blanket clutched in her hand. The baby moaned with fright, and Juana's eyes were wide and terrified. Kino could see the house was gone, and he did not question Juana. He knew, but she said it was torn up and the floor dug. Even the baby's box turned out, and as I looked, they put the fire to the outside. Who do you think did this? Let's see if we can find out. The fierce light of the burning house lighted Kino's face strongly. Who? He demanded. I don't know, she said. The dark ones. That's ominous. This is also kind of a motif. The dark figures attacking. The dark figures attacked Kino on the path. Juana was a dark figure in the doorway when she took the pearl. There's so much darkness. Y'all, light and darkness is a huge, powerful motif in this piece. The neighbors were tumbling from their houses now, almost as if they were falling out of them. That's how fast they were moving. And they watched the falling sparks and stamped them out to save their own houses. Thinking about the fires that we've experienced lately, the biggest danger is actually not the initial fire, but how it spreads because it's got little embers falling all over the place. So the neighbors are very worried for their own homes. Suddenly, Kino was afraid. The light made him afraid. Whoa. The light, the symbol of goodness, makes him fearful? He remembered the man lying dead in the brush beside the path, and he took Juana by the arm and drew her into the shadow of a house, away from the light. For light was danger to him. This is almost like a reverse Adam and Eve. Look, the man here is dragging the woman into the shadow. This is unlike Eve leading Adam into temptation. This is Kino dragging Juana away from the light. That is some deep symbolism there. For a moment he considered, and then he worked among the shadows until he came to the house of Juan Tomas, his brother, and he slipped into the doorway and drew Juana after him. Outside, he could hear the squeal of children and the shouts of the neighbors, for his friends thought he might be inside the burning house. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? Think about his neighbors' perspective. All of his neighbors, remember, they had followed him to the doctor, they had followed him to the pearl buyers. His neighbors are all up in his business because they care about him. At least the ones who aren't trying to rob him and kill him and stuff. But they're thinking, oh my gosh, my neighbor is dying in that burning building. They must be freaking out. But he's made it safely to Juan Tomas's house. Juan is there. We presume that Coyotito is there. So he's in a safe place. At least we think so. The house of Juan Tomas was almost exactly like Kino's house. Nearly all the brush houses were alike. And all leaked light and air. Ooh, so there's light getting inside this brush house, even though we've already established that light is a danger. So that Juana and Kino, sitting in the corner of the brother's house, could see the leaping flames through the wall. They saw the flames tall and furious. They saw the roof fall and watched the fire die down as quickly as a twig fire dies. Now, the house that has fallen is just Kino's house. The neighbors have been taking care of their houses. Juan Tomas's house, we can presume, is safe. They heard the cries of warning of their friends and the shrill, the high-pitched, keening cry, almost like a wail, the keening cry of Apollonia, wife of Juan Tomas. She, being the nearest woman relative, raised a formal lament for the dead of the family. This would be like a cultural tradition for them, where there would be like a special song of sadness. Lament is like incredible sadness. And there would be like a special song that you would sing. Remember, Kino's people, they conduct their whole lives in singing. Apollonia realized that she was wearing her second best head shawl, and she rushed to her house to get her fine new one. Imagine, right? She's like dressed kind of shabby. She wants to look nice, I guess because she's going to get so much attention from the neighbors because her sister-in-law died? I don't know. As she rummaged or looked around in a box by the wall, Kino's voice said quietly, Apollonia, do not cry out. We are not hurt. How do you come here? She demanded. Do not question, he said. Go now to Juan Tomas and bring him here and tell no one else. This is important to us, Apollonia. She paused, her hands helpless in front of her, and then, Yes, my brother-in-law, she said. In a few moments, Juan Tomas came back with her. He lighted a candle and came to them where they crouched in a corner and he said, Apollonia, see to the door, and do not let anyone enter. He was older, Juan Tomas, and he assumed the authority. Now, my brother, he said. I was attacked in the dark, said Kino, and in the fight I have killed a man. Who? Asked Juan Tomas quickly. I do not know. It is all darkness and shape of darkness. It is the pearl, said Juan Tomas. There is a devil in this pearl. You should have sold it and passed on the devil. Perhaps you can still sell it and buy peace for yourself. Wow, now we have another believer. At first it was just Juana, and now it's Juan Tomas. And Kino said, Oh, my brother, an insult has been put on me that is deeper than my life. For on the beach, my canoe is broken, my house is burned, and in the brush a dead man lies. Every escape is cut off. You must hide us, my brother. And Kino, looking closely, saw deep worry come into his brother's eyes, and he forestalled him or prevented him a possible refusal. Not for long, he said quickly, only until the day has passed and the new night has come. Then we will go. Right? So Juan Tomas is about to say nah, man, I'm not trying to stick my neck out for you. And Kino's like, no, that's cool, man, just a day. I will hide you, said Juan Tomas. I do not want to bring danger to you, Kino said. I know I am like a leprosy. Leprosy is a very contagious disease that, especially in older times, was considered you have leprosy, get out of here. You have to get away from everybody. You have to be totally isolated. I know I am like a leprosy, like a contagious disease. I will go tonight, and then you will be safe. I will protect you, said Juan Tomas, and he called, Apollonia, close up the door. Do not even whisper that Kino is here. They sat silently all day in the darkness of the house, and they could hear the neighbors speaking of them. Through the walls of the house, they could watch their neighbors raking through the ashes, think about a rake like you'd use in the yard, to find the bones. Because remember, they think that Kino and Juana and even the baby have died in the fire. Crouching in the house of Juan Tomas, they heard the shock go into their neighbors' minds at the news of the broken boat. Juan Tomas went out among the neighbors to divert or move away their suspicions, and he gave them theories and ideas of what had happened to Kino and to Juana and to the baby. So he's trying to trick them. He's trying to give them ideas that aren't really real. So he's using his different point of view in order to keep his family safe. To one, he said, I think they have gone south along the coast to escape the evil that was on them. And to another, Kino would never leave the sea. Perhaps he found another boat. And he said, Apollonia is ill with grief. And in that day, the wind rose up to beat the gulf and tore the kelps or the seaweed sort of stuff and weeds that lined the shore, and the wind cried through the brush houses, and no boat was safe on the water. Then Juan Tomas told among his neighbors, Kino is gone. If he went to the sea, he is drowned by now. Whew. He's trying to trick them. And after each trip among the neighbors, Juan Tomas came back with something borrowed. He brought a little woven straw bag of red beans and a gourd or a hollowed out squash, almost like a pumpkin turned into a bowl. So a gourd full of rice. He borrowed a cup of dried peppers and a block of salt, and he brought in a long working knife, 18 inches long and heavy, as a small axe, a tool, and a weapon, right? Because you would be able to maybe cut down a small tree to use as firewood, maybe. And when Kino saw this knife, his eyes lighted up. Ooh, Kino, don't be that excited about a weapon, brother. His eyes lighted up, and he fondled the blade, and his thumb tested the edge. So it was kind of testing to see how sharp it was. The wind, pay attention to this word here, the wind screamed over the gulf and turned the water white, and the mangroves, remember those trees, plunged like frightened cattle, and a fine sandy dust rose from the land and hung in a stifling cloud over the sea, a cloud that you can't breathe through, kind of like how bad the fires have made the air breathing in LA. The wind drove off the clouds and skimmed the sky clean and drifted the sand of the country like snow. Then Juan Tomas, when the evening approached, talked long with his brother. "Where will you go?" "To the north," said Kino. "I have heard that there are cities in the north." "Avoid the shore," said Juan Tomas. "They are making a party, like a search party, to search the shore. The men in the city will look for you. Do you still have the pearl?" "I have it," said Kino, "and I will keep it. I might have given it as a gift, but now it is my misfortune, my bad luck, and my life, and I will keep it." His eyes were hard and cruel and bitter. Whew. Think about what that means for the pearl symbolically. He's going to keep it. Coyotito whimpered, and Juana muttered little magics over him to make him silent. "The wind is good," said Juan Tomas. "There will be no tracks, so maybe the wind will kind of like blow their footsteps away." They left quietly in the dark before the moon had risen. The family stood formally, as if for a special occasion, in the house of Juan Tomas. Juana carried Coyotito on her back, covered and held in by her head shawl, and the baby slept, cheek turned sideways against her shoulder. The head shawl covered the baby, and one end of it came across Juana's nose to protect her from the evil night air. Juan Tomas embraced his brother with the double embrace and kissed him on both cheeks. "Go with God," he said, and it was like a death. "You will not give up the pearl?" "This pearl has become my soul," said Kino. "If I give it up, I shall lose my soul. Go thou also with God." That is some heavy stuff to think about. Take a minute and write about how the pearl has evolved. Think about how the pearl began in Juana's mind, where she was praying for a pearl to save Coyotito with money for the doctor. And then they found the pearl and they rejoiced and planned all these positive things. And think about how that has evolved now to, if I give it up, I shall lose my soul. Take 2 or 3 minutes, write about that.